Welcome everybody to another panel discussion for the Campfire project. And I'm so delighted that we are getting together today to talk about life skills. And I have with me Heather Mitchell, who is a money coach, and mentor, Derek Rogers, who's a well-being and mental health coach, and Sally Thibault, who's a transformational wellness and accountability coach. And I am Angela Heise. I'm an emotional intelligence coach and human skills trainer. So Derek and I talked about this, Sally and I talked about it, Heather and I talked about it, about what are the life skills we're all supposed to have and that nobody teaches us or that we are expected to have. I know that with emotions, children are now learning that, but there's a whole age group before the 7-8-year-olds, you know, people like us and younger to about 7-8 who have none of these skills. I know that when I was a girl guide, I played Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game for kids with my girls, and the mothers strongly opposed to that because they wanted to make dampers and bath salts. It's like, you know, we should really talk about these things because, you know, money matters, and a lot of people get divorced, and in my experience, a lot of women have no idea about financial stuff because that's the man stuff, partner stuff,
right?
And Derek and I talked about mental health and fitness and, you know, and Sally nutrition and all of these things. I mean, there's just so much we can talk about. So Derek was already starting to talk before we started to record, and he's got a lot to say. So you want to start talking about your impression of schools?
Yes, well, that's why I'm not in schools anymore. Schools were designed for systems, society 100 years ago, and they haven't really changed, unfortunately. And everybody is just too attached to that. So yes, if I won, you know, $50 million, I would create my own school and have it not a rectangular school. I'd make it a round school, and we'd learn all of these practical life skills that are not taught. And my experience personally was teaching year 7 maths and year 8 maths, and it was just this week we're teaching this, next week we're teaching that, next week, and on and on. And working out with money and finances, that was a little bit in year 8 for 1 week, and then in year 10 it's covered for another lot for another week, and maybe in year 9 for just one topic. But do they get it and do they put it into practice? No, and it's only the alternative year 11, year 12 curriculum that came out of Victoria, which has now been scrapped, called VCAL, Victorian Institute of Applied Learning, to give you real life skills. There you go. There's another example of finance and understanding money, and we do projects and we do raffles and how's this money and starting a business. It's all just been scrapped, and it's just this academic curriculum to go on to university that schools are designed for that is failing so many of us. And I was just appalled at what I was thrown into and expected to teach. And you know, am I the only person? But you go into a supermarket or a takeaway and you find that the average young person there who's working there on the weekend doesn't even know their times tables. So they didn't learn the basics. They didn't learn about money. They didn't learn. It was just curriculum, next week. So I think it's just failed so many.
Well, that takes us straight to Heather, right?
Indeed. I mean, you know, we have such a problem. I mean, debt levels are insane. You know, people are living paycheck to paycheck. You know, now we've got high inflation and high interest rates. You know, people are struggling because they just simply don't know what to do. They weren't taught about, you know, the basics, compound growth. Everybody should know that. You know, that's the fundamental kind of truism, that if you understand that as a fundamental, then you can, you know, you can succeed at life. You know, you can work yourself on the right side of compound growth rather than on the wrong side, which is unfortunately where most people find themselves. You know, there are some basic things that, you know, children really do understand. So I was a very unusual child because my dad was very forward thinking. So he taught me how to invest, you know, forever. I mean, I remember even being age 6 and being part of that conversation. And the thing is, the amazing thing is, a 6-year-old understands so much more than you would give them credit for. So it's like, just start them young, start them as soon as possible to really understand it, because then it just becomes part of you. It's not over there. It's not something that's a hard thing. It's just something that's part of you. And, you know, I mean, the cynical side of me says that they don't teach you about investing because they don't want people to know about it. Because if everybody was an investor, then who'd be doing all the work, right? So, you know, it feels too much of an oversight. You know, we use money every single day of our lives. But anyway, that's my kind of personal view of it. But, you know, it takes this kind of conversation to get these things onto the agenda.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're talking about money still, or are we talking about other life skills now? Because I am completely open where this goes.
I mean, there are plenty more money things to talk about. You know, I mean, obviously the other thing is just learning about investing. You know, if people knew exactly how that worked, you know, they could start young. You know, the best kind of compound growth starts from the youngest possible age. So it's like just trying to sort of get them in early. And obviously the other thing is about spending. You know, if people just spend everything that they have, then that's kind of really kind of worrying as well. So, you know, just allowing people to understand that kind of is the other side of the equation on compound growth. Anyway, I'll let everyone else speak.
No, I think it's important because I grew up with a father who was seemingly a really savvy investor, but he never taught me anything.
Right.
Like nothing. I mean, I came out of it and he gave me a little bit of money at some point and invested it. And it gave me money every year that I used then to go on a holiday. But I never, if I had known what I know now, I would have invested this money and I would have let it sit. It would have made a considerable difference to things now. But I didn't know. I had no idea.
No. And this is the thing, if your parents are not savvy like yours were, Heather, or your father were, and this is, if we're not getting that education at home about life skills and money being one of them, then is it school's responsibility to pick it up? Or, you know, do you have to wait till you're an adult and go online now and do a course in a skill that I don't have?
Yeah.
And it's so much harder when you're older, you know, and the real unfortunate part about it is that money becomes a taboo topic. No one can talk about it. You can't share, you can't talk about anything. You know, I remember once this girl was went to a Steiner school and she was very open and she told everyone how much she earned and everyone was like shocked, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, you can't do that, you can't say that, you know, it's so, you know, silent. You have to be so silent about it that you're kind of in your own sort of personal, you know, hell, whereas, you know, everybody else is in the same boat. If they only start talking about it, then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, this is really normal. I can learn about money like I can learn about French or geography or history or any other subject. It's kind of made into this kind of big thing that you're supposed to sort of just know about without ever being taught.
And it's interesting, Heather, I think the way it is set up now is for a spending generation coming through. You know, that you know, when they talk about interest rates going to 5%, or, you know, we've all been through them going to 22%. And what we all had to do during that time, which has meant we cut down on our spending. That's what we did. We, you know, I don't ever remember taking my kids out for dinner during those times. We had fish and chips on the living room floor on a Friday. That was their big, you know, excitement. And I think now, you know, it's interesting because we've been cleaning out my father's house just recently. You can't give away old furniture. That kids don't want, young people don't want it because they can go to some of the big box stores and they'll get interest free for 2 years or 3 years or whatever they're sold. Plus they have to have the big screen TV, plus they have to have their phone and their Wi-Fi. So, and it's all, and then, you know, go and get a coffee and then go, you know, buy their sushi and all that stuff that didn't exist in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so I think that's why it's really important to be teaching this stuff in school, because, you know, all finances go on cycles. You know, my husband's been in real estate for 35 years. Everything goes on a cycle. What comes up goes down. And the thing is, don't buy when it's up, buy when it's down, and then sell when it's up. But what's happened in this last little while is these young people have been taught this scarcity mentality. Quick, get in now or it's going to go high. It always comes down. That's the way it's been all these years. And I think for many young people right now, I think they were really struggling with the cost of living because they've never had to go without. They've never had to pull back and say, you know what, I'll go without my coffee today. I might, get a coffee from home, get a plunger coffee. We sat down one day, and my daughter lives overseas, and we were doing her Excel spreadsheet with her on budget. And the minute she saw, because they just tap, you see, they don't even have cash that comes out of their hands, they just tap. When we showed her on her bank account how much money was coming out in coffee, she went and bought a coffee plunger. She's like, what? $35 a week on coffee? See, because it's the tap, the card is not real. It's not the money counting out. And I think that I feel sorry for young people, as you were saying, they're not taught about investing, but they're also not taught about spending or saving and how important that is for them.
Yeah, they have an instant, kids now are growing up with an instant gratification world. We saw that during COVID. I know someone very close to me spent $6,000 on buying gifts for herself during COVID, because she would go online and bang, it would turn up within a couple of days.
Yeah.
And so that was money that was saved for a house, but because I'm depressed at home, it just became, and they have this instant gratification, want it now, because they're sold to. And there's a thing, Sally, there's a, when we grew up, it was you had to save and you had to, now they don't have to save. The competition for marketing and so many thousand products is in the face. I think that the research on marketing was, when we grew up, it was like you were exposed to 3,000 advertisements a month or something. Now they're exposed to 3,000 advertisements a day. So
in their face, on their phone.
Their face, instant now. You can have it now. And then you said, if you don't have it now, there's the pay later schemes, and then they're getting caught up in that. Well, we grew up, it was sort of the bad credit cards, and now it's all smoke and mirrors, and the young people are getting caught up in that. A friend of mine said she's got friends who are in their early 20s and they owe $20,000 to $30,000 in debt on their cards already, because they're just trapped in this cycle.
The average non-mortgage debt is like $30,000 US. That across the whole all age groups, but I mean it's like insane. My
daughter lives in Canada. My two daughters live in Canada, and my daughter is renting at the moment. She's renting another place, and in Canada it's set up, you have to have a credit rating before you can borrow any money. The only way young people get credit ratings is to get a credit card. So from the moment they're leaving school, they're handed credit cards to start. And of course, the young, ours was, Caitlin, make sure you pay off the balance each month. And of course, she's, 19 years old, whatever. And then all of a sudden, she'd, reach the limit maximum of $1,000 on a credit card. And she said, Mum, that happens so quickly. I said, yeah, because the compound interest, this interest is, so she got to the point where she could only pay the minimum payment each month. But it was set up that way. She couldn't do anything till she got a credit rating. So she had to get a credit card to get a credit rating. I mean, the cycle is just extraordinary.
I heard that in America too. When you turn 18, you get these credit cards sent to you in the mail.
Yeah. And they will have as many as 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 credit cards at any given point in time.
And the thing is, nobody teaches kids how to budget. I remember sitting down with an 18-year-old, very complicated relationship through ex-husband and all, but he sat down, he was going to move out, and we sat down together, and I said, so, you want to move out, you want to do all of this, how much money do you need to earn in order to cover your expenses? So let's look at what your expenses are. And he went, well, Mom and Dad are surely going to pay some of those. And I went, no, let's operate on they're not going to do that. So we're like, tolls, car insurance, are they going to pay for that? No, we're operating on them not doing this, because they'd already said he wants to move out, he can pay for himself. Well, there was alcohol, $50 a week, gaming, all sorts of expenses where when we added it all up, he had to earn and this is a number of years ago, $42,000 a year just to cover expenses. There was nothing, and then I said, so what kind of job do you want to get? So what kind of average hourly rate are you looking at? And so we calculated that, and it just didn't add up. There was absolutely no way he could do that. So we started looking at what he could cut back on. And again, $50 of alcohol and gaming and all of the stuff that was in there. He was really, and we went on a trip we met in the US a few years ago. And And I said, and he had planned this whole trip around the whole country and all of that. And I said, so very carefully, you know, so how are you going with all of this, you know, like planning and expenses and all of that? And he said, I did a budget, of course, Angela.
Good for you.
And he did it. He did it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and of course it's personally more satisfying when you can save up, have a goal, and then you achieve that goal, rather than the opposite feeling of paying for something on, you know, just tap and go, and then you get the cards and you realize that your bank account's gone down the other way, and then you get a feeling of regret, etc., etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
So money. Are we going to make this whole discussion about money? Then we'll relabel it and call it money skills. Or are we going to talk about other skills? Because we've already spent a long time on this, and I'm keen because there are so many other life skills I'd love to explore, because you know, they're all really important. And I know money really matters, especially at the moment. I totally get that. But so does mental health, for example. You know, and again, nutrition, for example, right? Eating. All of these things are so out of balance at the moment. Exercise, you know, like none of these things are taught how you know, like I talk to clients and I say, your stress levels at the moment, the things that you accept, you know, again, not managing your emotions, not managing your mental health, not managing, you know, all of that. You may not feel the effects right now, but give it 10 or 20 years and you will have some long-term effects that you could stop right now. But they don't have the skills to even think about those, because we talked about this. If you don't know what you need, how can you ask for it? If everybody around you does the same thing, because everybody's on the same page of, I spend my credit card, I go out and eat fast food, you know, emotions I suppress by drinking alcohol, I don't need to exercise because, you know, whatever. Nobody needs to change anything.
This current generation of children will be the first generation that will not live longer than the generation before.
Yeah.
The way it's going.
Well, you're seeing that in Okinawa in Japan. So the place of the longest lived women in the world, and now their grandchildren are literally dying in their 40s and 50s because they're sitting at a computer eating pizzas and Coke. Yeah.
I mean, from I guess from my perspective, when it comes to food and nutrition and exercise, I mean, the children, I worked in a school for 10 years, and I would be horrified to walk into the canteen. See what children can grab. I mean, the school the kids went to are pretty good, you know, there's no sugary drinks and all that stuff, but there's still a lot of processed foods, especially for the impact of seed oils on our young people in particular, because so much of the processed food is created with seed oils, and the body doesn't know what to do with those. You know, they're called vegetable oils. No vegetable in sunflowers or safflower. Like, it's the way it's been sold as this alternative, this healthy alternative to fat. And, you know, I've been in the fitness industry for over 40 years, and I've seen this comes in cycles every decade about what to eat and what not to eat. And then they go, whoops, oh, sorry, made a mistake, let's go back. You know, when I was teaching fitness in the 80s, we taught 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. We're now discovering that that's the worst thing that you can actually do for your health and your wellness. And but that just, you know, because most of the research is funded by big food or big pharma. So the things we're reading are often tainted in their research in order for them to get the funding. But recently I met a gal who's a food technologist, and she'd come back from a conference just prior to COVID, and she said, I was horrified at what they are now doing to food with the sole purpose of making people want to eat more. It's the sole purpose. So in the US now, they've just brought out a new range of Doritos chips, you know, corn chips. Every 5th one has chili on it. So the idea is that you have one with chili on it, and you go looking for another one because the next one you get doesn't have chili. The next one you get doesn't have chili. So you keep eating it till you get the next piece of chili.
Right.
So the whole idea this food technology is teaching is having to get people, and it's all being used with chemicals, of course, to create the body wanting more. So you have no control when you're reaching. It's like chocolate, the way chocolate's designed, very little chocolate in chocolate. It's mostly sugar. Whereas what our body really wants is cacao or deep chocolate. That's what dark chocolate. That's what it's looking for. And so people will eat a whole block of chocolate because what they're looking for is that chocolate. All they're getting is the sugar.
Yeah.
But for the children, I think now it would be essentially important to study nutrition at school. Very, very. I mean, I know that teachers are there, watching what they've put in their lunch boxes. But even some of the things they're allowing children to eat are not as good as what we think they are. I remember with my kids, I mean, I would put my hand up here because I'm busy mum, all that stuff, when pizza shapes first came out and they were baked, not fried. And I thought, okay, that's a healthy snack, without thinking, okay, what's it baked in? What's the stuff that sits on the top? And I know many parents struggle with this because they've got busy lives. But the truth is, if we all ate more at home, good whole nutrition, fish, meat, chicken, good vegetables, potatoes cooked in the oven, not deep fried, our health would just change like overnight. But so much more convenience foods. In fact, the latest thing is the amount of convenience foods, frozen pizzas, all that type of food, dramatic impact on metabolic health. So
yeah, what I'm hearing here is for me particularly is self-awareness. So I'm a big firm believer we can't have too much self-awareness, and the more self-awareness we have, the more it allows us to slow our game down.
Right.
Am I communicating well, whether it's emotional intelligence and my relationships? Is it with why am I choosing this I'm eating? Why am I buying this thing that I don't need? And so it's teaching people to slow down and make better choices and just be aware of that and what's driving them. We learn in NLP that 99% of people never achieve what they're capable of achieving because of our self-limiting belief systems. We learn that 95 to 98% of people are running on automatic pilot, so they're not aware of why they're buying stuff and doing stuff. And particularly with food, Sally, we know that when we're tired and hungry, our brain hunts for fats, sugars, and salt. And so I do this with tradies. I do a workshop on escaping the fatigue whirlpool. In the morning they get up and they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Don't have time for breakfast. They'll be going, and on the way they'll call in and they'll grab their 750 ml of triple shot iced coffee milk, and they'll have one of those, maybe two of those, a couple of cans of Red Bull, and then by 10 o'clock in the morning they've had no nutrition, and then their brain
shaking,
their survival brain, and then they go in. I need to get some dim sims. I need dim sims. What their body is craving is the salt and nutrition. Then they go to a cafe and they get their fats from their donuts and their bread and sausage, sausage rolls and stuff. So they're all the crap food all day long, making poor decisions. They're grumpy. They're terrible to be with. How much mistakes are they making?
Yeah.
And then they get home and then they have a big meal, and then they have 6 beers to wash it down with, fall asleep on the couch, and then our stomach goes, holy crap, how am I supposed to digest that because we haven't moved after a meal? And then they don't sleep very well, and then they get up in the morning and guess what? Repeat the whole cycle.
Yeah.
So I say to people, McDonald's is on the corner when you come into your town, and KFC is right next to it, and it's no accident. They're actually in the real estate business, because they know that you're tired and hungry at the end of your shift, end of the day, and oh my God, my car just automatically goes into the drive-through.
Yeah.
And you come out and you've bought some food and you're sitting down, you're eating it, and then you go, how did that happen? Because our brain is in survival mode, and it's just.
And the emotional brain operates 200 times faster than the rational, reasonable side of the brain.
Yeah.
So I get that all the time with women who are saying to me, this week I'm going to eat healthy and blah, blah, blah. And I said, at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, suddenly they're looking down and there's an empty chocolate in front of them. They're like, how the hell did that get there? Because it's not your rational, reasonable brain making a decision.
And you're kind of borrowing you use these stimulants to give you energy, but all you're doing is you're borrowing energy from your future self. So you have to pay for it at some point.
Right.
So it's just went, and it's the sort of least healthy way of doing it. But it just reminds me that, my background is market research. So we used to do a lot of product tests, and it was very interesting because, clients would, you know, have two different products, A and B or E and F, and they would see if people could tell the difference between them. So they keep cheapening the ingredients and seeing what they can get away with, and see if they can notice the difference. If not, great, keep cheapening the ingredients until in the end what you've got is got no nutritional value whatsoever. You know, and talking about, you know, marketing as well, you know, the food pyramid, you know, that wasn't put together about public health. It was about the farmers and what they want people to buy because of the farmers that are sponsoring it. So it's just, everything is upside down. Everything you think is what it is not what it is. So it's really quite depressing.
I do feel for young parents. I mean, I really do feel for young mums at the moment in particular, because they're bombarded with so much information about what's right for their children. And I think often for young people that power is taken away from them, because they're getting hit from everywhere with what's right to eat, what I should do for my child, what I shouldn't do for my child. You're a present parent or you're a non-present parent. And I really do feel for young, when we were having children, I got the information from my mother. You know, that was about the only way I could get information about what to do. But now they're being hit all over the place. And I really do feel for them. I think because nutrition information changes. As I said, every decade there's a new lot, and now they're coming out talking about, you know, women shouldn't do keto, especially menopausal women shouldn't do keto, and yet 5 years ago it was the number one thing that you should be doing. Now, of course, it impacts on the endocrine system, gut health, especially for menopausal women, and so, you know, this continues to go on. There's no one size fits all model, and I think, you know, Derek, you'd probably get this as well. We've got to teach people how to listen to their own intuition, their own inner wisdom, do their own research about what is right for me. You know, as I said, I worked in a school too, and, you know, it's like a cookie cutter model. You'd see these kids go through year 12, telling them they were a great cohort and they should all get along, and this, you know, mismatch of individuals with very, very little in common, because they all go off to uni or work or whatever, and probably half of them never ever see each other again. And I think there's a ability to teach children to be an individual and to trust in their wisdom, to ask lots of questions and not have this kind of dogma about what's right and wrong for us. I think that's, to me, as I said, 40 years in this industry, I've seen it and I've taught it. And now very much about helping people get in tune with what's right. Let the rules go. No one sets a rule, that's their rule. That's not your rule. What's right for you is not. I have a client at the moment who's doing the carnivore diet. Well, I just nearly had a heart attack when she told me what she was doing. Literally, you're going to have a heart attack. But for her, it's the right thing for her at this point in time. Yeah. And so I can't judge that. That's not my role to judge it. She's a wise woman. She's in her 50s. But it's like, instead of kind of grabbing hold of what's trendy, I think truly one of the big life skills is to give people the confidence to say, you know what, that doesn't feel right for me, and be absolutely 100% with that. And that's not right for me. And I'd see if we could see more of that, I think, for young people, and give them that confidence to understand their own emotions and to let, you know, deal with them in a positive way. If you feel like getting on the floor and having a cry and, you know, beating the ground, you go right ahead. Just don't hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
You're right. Get that motion out of your body. What happened? How did you feel? Why did you feel so disempowered? And let's go.
We don't teach children that. I mean, I know that when I grew up, and I had really good intuition about the feelings that people had around me. And like, my mother was sick all the time, and I would say, are you in pain? And she would say, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you unhappy? No, everything is good. And then she tried to commit suicide, and nothing was good, you know. But I really stopped trusting myself and my intuition. And the same thing goes for other areas of life. Again, how much I spent, you know, again, as you said, please yourself. You know, it's like, again, there were all these rules that I had to follow that nobody explained to me, but that were supposed to be the right ones. But nobody says, you know, be an individual. Now it is, yes, be an individual, but you still have to follow rules in order to be that. You have to follow the right influencers. You have to do, you know, there are all these things. Whereas saying to somebody, you know, do what makes you happy, but you listen to your intuition. If you can't follow you can't access your intuition because your gut is completely shot. And we know that intuition sits in the gut because we're eating the wrong foods.
So does fear. That is fear.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we don't know how to listen to ourselves anymore, because we have the wrong nutrition. We're not moving our bodies. You know, we're not really looking at what matters, and everybody around us is doing the same thing. You know, blindly spending money. And I'm totally generalizing here, of course, because I mean, look at you guys. You know, there are a lot of people around there who are conscious, but we're talking about young people.
Yes.
And young people really would benefit from learning these skills.
Absolutely.
And the same diseases are happening, you know, these diseases like cancer and heart disease and diabetes, you know, these are all preventable diseases. You know, it's like it becomes an inevitability, but it's not. It's only because everybody is having these same lifestyles. And so, you know, it's like, stop, you know, just stop and rethink and decide, you know, what is right for me. And that individualistic approach is so important, as you said, to really understand, you know, what's right for me and my body will be different to your body. So we'll be having completely different diets, you know, and lifestyles to match.
So I run a program, an online program, where I'm reteaching women how to trust their intuition about eating. And I get this question all the time. Will you give me a meal plan? No. No, that's my program then. That's not your program. My job is to teach you to feel empowered. I'll give you lots of information about nutrition, and we keep updated with all the latest research. But in the end, and for many women, they go, oh, well, I can't do it if I don't get a meal plan. Well, you just Google. You like a recipe? Just there's the biggest search engine in the world called Google. Find it, and then
that's the problem. People don't know how to cook anymore.
Right.
That's a serious issue, because you go to the supermarket and you get these bags that say just eat meat and add meat and vegetables, and when you look at the ingredients list, I go, I've got a spice drawer that's about this big. You know, all I have to do is go into that and it's that. But if you can't trust your taste buds anymore because they're completely compromised, and you're not really willing to give it a go and try to find things out, why would you? Then a meal plan that tells you exactly with recipes what to do.
Yeah.
That's right. So I mean, it's up to us as individuals to say, I get that, but oh, hang on, how does that feel for me? Oh, but you know, and because you know, I deal with a lot of women my age. I'm in my mid-60s who cannot do a push-up or a squat or can't walk more than 5 minutes. And every single woman that I speak to says, you know, I did this to myself. Yeah, you're right. I'm not going to let you off the hook. You did. But the beautiful thing is you can reverse it. At any point in time. So, you know, when you're talking about money, when you're talking about emotions, you're talking about nutrition, the minute you make a decision to change it, you can, you know, especially your health, you can turn that right around. The minute you decide, it takes us, you know, as I said, I put up a reel yesterday that said, it's boring. It is boring. Habits are boring. Do the same thing every day. Habits are boring. But the simplicity of those habits is a thing that creates success.
And we all have habits. And that's the distinction a lot of people are not aware of. If we all have habits, it's whether, and the wisdom is that what we're talking about now, slowing your game down. What are the habits that are serving me well? And what are the habits that are not serving me well? And then, oh yeah, I've got some of those. And then having the courage to do something about them and seek out someone who has better results. But because I'll get back to people just being sold external, you know, the spaces that we have just being quiet are so rare that we have to seek them, because we're just being bombarded with everything we get on our phone, on our devices, in our car, everything. It's just, we're so externally focused. I think it's 99% of people, 99% of the time is what do I do is all based on outside. And as we're saying now is if we stop and listen, and particularly with our health, and our gut is an obvious one, and our brain, is how's that sitting with me? And but we need to create space, because people will be talking to us. We'll have the radio on, we'll have our podcast on, our headphones on, everything. You know, I live near a beautiful beach here, and I'm surprised at people walking along and they've got the headphones on, and they'll be listening to this, and they'll be talking to someone else. I go, you're not even taking a deep breath. You're not even being present where you are.
Absolutely.
We're just, you know, I'm going to have more information like this, and you know, it can literally do your head in. And so it's that listening to our body. It's trying to talk to us and guide us all day long. That's whether we're wise enough to just stop and listen to it. And it'll tell us whether this is sitting right. I know with eating, if I had a coffee, had a bit of chocolate, and in my tummy, so okay, I'm on an empty tummy, a little bit sensitive, so okay, catch myself, what can I do about it? But that's only if, it's not compulsory to learn. It's just a bloody good idea.
Oh, I saw a great blog yesterday, and it said, you're talking about teenagers and their phones, and this woman said, just think of all the songs that won't be written, the art that won't be painted, the books that won't be written, because everyone's so geared now to reading or watching. You don't, exactly what you were just saying, Derek, we don't have that time. I know when I wrote my books, it was all about slowing down and being quiet to it, because, I often said, I don't know who wrote that book, but I don't know, I think I was present. I think I was just typing it. I don't know who wrote that. Somebody smarter than me. But that's what it requires in order to write a book, is that you remove yourself and stop overthinking. But if you're constantly looking for that input from others, and that, now reels, the best reels are now 5 seconds long. I mean, that's how bad it's getting on Instagram.
Yeah, every day now, I've done it for the past 6 weeks, but I don't intend to stop. But I sit down for 1 hour every day. And it's not just about meditating, it's about deep emotional healing. And I think that, again, that's not something that we've been taught about, but it's, oh my God, it's absolutely necessary, because we are holding all of these emotions in our bodies. They are just stuck there, and we've probably got a load of them from our ancestors as well to boot. So we're just walking around with these, traumas and emotions, and they're causing all these diseases and whatnot in our bodies, because they're just stuck there. And if we don't have that space to sit there and get rid of them, then they're just going to cause all sorts of havoc, and it'll only get worse.
And absolutely. And so moving the topic slowly to our mental health, one of the simplest things we can do for our mental health is just slow down, be in the moment, and be happy with the moment, whatever we're doing, whether we're gardening with our family, whatever we're doing, and just be present. And it's just this constant cycle of the anxiety from stuff that we have to do today, and then the anxiety from the stuff that we didn't do yesterday, where all happiness, all peace, all joy, love is in the present moment. And it's just, I think, that over the last 3 years with bushfires and floods and COVID, the biggest skill we can teach people and adopt is just practice mindfulness.
I'm just in the process of finishing an app. So my first app that's going to go on Apple and Android on listening. And in my introduction, the first thing I say is, this is not about learning how to ask clever questions. This is about being present. And I walk people through all the things they do when we're in conversation or when we're doing tasks that stop us from being present. And one of the first tasks, I'll tell you that right now, is read a full article. And I write at the bottom, this was your first attention exercise. How many of the words did you actually take in? I put everything in single sentence paragraphs, so it's easy to read, because I can't write paragraphs anymore. But if you haven't read this properly, go back and start reading it again, because this is important information, because people don't know it anymore.
I love it. I love it. I mean, how many things do you see on social media with this funny headline, and then people commenting on the headline, and you'll see, could you just read the article? That's what it says. We've become so used to these sound bites.
This away.
That's one thing. I've got 6 different ways of blocking social media and other things that you don't want to do. You can put it on your phone or your computer. So I'm covering, I hope, all of the bases of how do you stay present, engaging with somebody, finishing a task efficiently, because nobody does that. Nobody teaches us how to manage that. In fact, the thing, and what's the social media documentary that was what is it? Social Dilemma?
Yes.
Yes. The game is, how much attention can I capture? And this is, again, we don't teach people that. I mean, if you really are interested in this, it's a book called by Johann Hari called Stolen Focus. I can highly recommend, and I would recommend every teenager read that. Every single person needs to read that. It's so important, because, again, if we don't know how to manage our emotions, our focus, our nutrition, money, what's going to happen to us?
You're right.
I think what's happening now.
Yeah, there's 1,000,001 companies out there crying for our attention. Absolutely. And our focus. Yeah.
And as you say, not us as individuals, but us as a species as well. Because if everyone's just stuck to their phones and just not even present, not even aware of what's going on around them, you know, it's just going to get worse. It's just going to go more and more kind of get sucked away.
Yeah. But I like your listening skills, Angela. Go back to the school analogy. We're taught how to read, we're taught how to write, a little bit of how to speak, but we're not taught how to listen at school. You know, and relationships break down at home, they break down in the workplace through people not listening. A lot of people talking, a lot of people yelling, but listening, you know. I remember in my coach training, there's 7 levels of listening, and I thought it was only 2, listening and pretending to listen, you know. But, you know, guess what? There's more levels.
What did you say? I'm here. Yeah.
That listening with the intent to understand, not to respond.
Yeah,
that's a
when I'm working with couples, that's probably the biggest issue that they have, is to sit back and to listen without jumping in. What do I need to understand here? Listen with the intent to understand. What is that person really trying to say to me? What's the nonverbal communication? You see that, you know, in NLP, what's that nonverbal communication? What are they not? What's the feeling I'm getting from this conversation? And to me, that's one of the strategies, the success strategy. I think all of us need to practice, Angela, and, you know, and your app is obviously fantastic in that way. The more you understand, but, you know, I have a friend who's very, very successful in network marketing. She's a multi-millionaire. And I asked her once, what's your greatest tip you could tell me about how you got to where you are? And she said, listening to people. That's it. Listening to people. I mean, there's no tricks, there's no words, there's just listening to people.
Yeah. Alan Stevens, who is the founder of the Campfire project, always says we've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them in proportion. So he includes, it's always 2 ears and 1 mouth, but he says you also got to look, you got to watch the body language. And then you hear, how do people speak? What is their tonality like? And what choice of words do they have? And then then you respond. And you don't react, you respond, obviously. That's another skill we really need to teach people, which is managing frustration and irritability and all of that, and not medicating and not going over the top or whatever it is. Yeah.
And recognizing our emotions.
Yes.
They're really extraordinary. I remember when my son was really little, a little toddler, I read somewhere that if you just label their emotions, then they're much happier. So he'd start crying about something, and I'd say, well, you're sad because you wanted to hold the keys and I wouldn't let you. You know, he instantly stopped crying. Boom. Because he felt understood. You know, and I just think that, you know, that goes such a long way in interpersonal communication. If you can just understand the person in front of you, it just makes all the difference.
Yeah. But also we've got to understand ourselves first to be able to understand others. You know, that's back to self-awareness. What, as Angela, you were just alluding to, you know, what frustrates us, what's getting us, what's activating us, what's triggering us. And conversations are a classic one. And, you know, you know, you're wrong and I'm right. And so, you know, we're going in there, and then the ego's, and it's all taking over. So it's all that self-awareness that we keep working on. I've been doing it for 20 years, and am I fully enlightened and know everything? No. You know, it's just
that's hilarious.
just on the journey.
Right.
It gives me that peace. It gives me that understanding. It gives me the ability to build rapport with people and to listen to them, which we're talking about, to be of service, but also to allow myself to experience the joy. You know, and I'm so grateful for it.
I've often tell this story on a podcast. One day I was spent all day creating a landing page for a new product we were developing. Hours I spent, 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and I was so proud of it. Images were right, the wording was right. I was so proud of it. My husband walks in the door at 5 o'clock, and I said, "Can you just run a quick eye check over this? You know, make sure I've got the spelling done. And I'll go get wine." Well, I'm in the kitchen thinking he's going to say, "Oh God, that's good. Come back." And I put the 2 glasses of wine down. He said, you're not very good with full stops, are you? And I went, bring. Yeah. And of course, then I went into the living room. I needed to catch myself before I lose the plot. Say to myself, okay, Miss Life Coach, what's going on for you? And immediately it took me back to grade 4, I think. And my English teacher told me I was a brilliant writer, but I wasn't very good with punctuation. That's where it was. And recognizing that before I lost the flow, practicing that, I'm still practicing that. Okay, what's going on for me?
Yeah.
Why am I being triggered by this? It was just he said, I think it's great, but I just, not really good. But when we can understand our triggers and say, okay, because to me, it's never about what's happening out there. It's always it's always about here. You are being triggered by something, and it's usually a childhood trauma, something that happened when you felt vulnerable, Yeah. And, I was looking for the nun in grade 4 to give me the English prize, maybe, I don't know, but my punctuation wasn't good enough. So it just took me straight back to there. And I think, like you were saying before, Heather, like when we honor people's emotions, I felt sad at that point that Sister Bernard wouldn't give me a thing, but no one ever said anything. My mother never said to me, gee, you must be sad, you missed out on that, or that she would have gone, oh, I'll listen to her. Well, yes, you probably do need, there was none of that. And I think, as you were saying in those, like teaching kids, I'm allowed to be sad, I'm allowed to be angry, I'm allowed to be frustrated, but I'm not going to get a participation award just because I showed up. If you miss out on something, you miss out on something. Okay, well, you've got two things to learn here. Either get better at it or stop doing it. Simple as that.
It's also about sort of mothering yourself.
Yes.
You can learn that skill to really sort of contain that emotion and to, heal yourself. You actually don't need anybody else if you learn the skill that you can actually, you're sort of, you can just sit with yourself and it just goes away, but you just have to give yourself that time and space and emotion and love and
I think you're right there. That's time. We get back to that, don't we, all the time? It's coming back to time and being centered and being quiet and understanding, I love getting up very early in the morning and journaling. It's just my quiet time. And if I allow that stuff to get out of my head, because when I wake up, I've always got all these ideas in my head, but give myself the time. It's quite interesting when you just sit there quietly with a journal and just process.
Yeah, and that's a great life skill. Back to our topic today is first thing in the morning, journal. Before you go to bed at night, time journal and get all that stuff out of your head. What they call it, what kind of writing?
Morning pages,
yeah. Free flow writing, so you're not thinking, it's just coming out. It's just consciousness. Yeah, that's right. Not a conscious, it's just a subconscious. It's coming out, and you just let it flow. And we need to do that, and that can be a form of venting. It can be a form of exploring. It can be a form of being creative. A lot of people that have wrote beautiful songs. The technique was just first thing in the morning, you just let it go. And one out of 30 might be worth writing, but if you sit there during the middle of the day, now it's 3 o'clock, I've got to do my songwriting and try and force it.
I need a hit song.
You can only write a hit song if you actually listen to yourself, but most people reach for their phone first thing in the morning to check their social media likes. You don't have a space for creativity to listen to your inner voice if you just immediately head for an influencer's opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The thing that I wanted to say is because we talked about, different life skills and what kids are learning in school, and how, specifically, you, Derek, and also Sally were unhappy about in schools, is that I think what's important is to recognize that each child has different intelligences. And I don't know, that's just something that popped into my head. I had a conversation with my neighbor across the road the other day, whose son is now in 1st grade. And the teacher has called her in to say he's causing a lot of problems because he seems to be delayed in his development because he doesn't know how to write properly yet. And he doesn't fit into the program. And I said, well, what does he do? She said, well, you ask him about nature. He will give you a lecture about the gecko that just crossed and he researches everything. He goes online and reads everything, and he knows all about nature. I said, have you looked at Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences? And she's like, what's that? And it's like, you've got inter and intrapersonal intelligence, you've got spatial intelligence, you've got mathematical, but you also have natural intelligence. So there's all these different kinds of intelligence that never get acknowledged and we never get taught about.
Yeah,
that's so fascinating. And also I remember watching a documentary just the other day, and they just talked about people like Michelangelo, who, you know, it wasn't this siloed, you know, science, maths, you know, everything was together. He was a scientist, he was an inventor, he was a philosopher, you know, he did all these different mathematician. You know, it was all pushed together, and it's the interplay between the different subjects where a lot of the genius comes. But because we separate it, it's like they're different things entirely, but they all intermingle together. So I think that the way we treat education should be just, you know, just rehashed altogether.
Well, I have 3 children. My eldest child is autistic, and my middle daughter, I think when they were designing school, she put her hand up and said, yes, that's me. She absolutely loved everything about school and ended up college captain and winning all the awards, blah, blah, blah. My youngest thought school was the biggest waste of her time. My eldest, because he was on the spectrum, he was told he had to write. He was told, and his passion was video games. Loved them, but it was always, oh, there's no future in video games. He's never going to amount to anything. He lives in Montreal and has worked there for 7 years, and he makes movies from video games. That's what he does. And he's currently writing a book about a video game and also a movie script. So, but his whole, and we pulled him out of school in year 10 because I thought this is ridiculous. I'm putting any child through this. Is just, if it happened now, I would have had them out straight away. All 3 of them would have been out. I would have homeschooled them straight away. But it's really interesting, like you was just saying, Andrew, the different intelligences. He didn't fit in, but they weren't going to bend for him. It was all about him fitting in the system. And I remember going, because we was writing, had to do, Dave was a visual, and they had to do the bridge to Deribithia, and he had to write a book report on it. No, wasn't going to read the book, wasn't going to, and they would say he's going to go nowhere because he's not reading the book. But on the election in 2012, he downloaded and read every representative across Australia and every senator across Australia policies on the environment, education and health. And he knew exactly what their policies were. And so when you go to vote for the Senate election, and you can either do top of the line, you count everyone to 1 to 100, he did 1 to 100 because he had the list. And so his passion very early on was politics and technology. He loved it, but the school wouldn't want him to, read that book. There was no allowances made. And I really feel for so many children who have slipped through those cracks, because they're different levels of a challenge. That young boy you were just telling about him, oh gosh, what a terrific kid to have in your class. I mean, you could have him doing all sorts of science projects and geology work. I mean, and it's not the teacher's fault either.
Well, the problem is often these kids are bullied as well if they don't fit in, and the teachers don't do much about it. In fact,
I know that.
Ones who say, yeah, that's not their fault, it's your child's fault because it doesn't fit in.
I've been there.
Yeah, and it's like, let's not go there, because that's really, because
Hence my first comment about designing a new school, that and that's why your alternative Montessori and your Steiner schools allow kids to be creative. And back in antiquity, from 0 to 7, they would just watch the children.
Yeah.
And if you were working with clay and making stuff, then you would go off and learn pottery, and you'd be an apprentice that. And if you like baking bread and do that, you'd go off and do that. So you'd work with your natural talents. And so then we decide 100 years ago, I know everybody needs to know a bit of everything. And then if you don't want to do everything, and if you're not good at everything, well, then there's something wrong with you. And this is our box system. But it's not. We're not, there might be, I don't know, percentage-wise, a quarter maybe of people who are, like myself. I was probably all-rounder. I just fit in and I could do anything and everything. But as we're hearing, a lot of people are not wired that way. And they have a particular focus in this direction, or direction. And I think educators need to be taught that this is the student's strengths, and we can slowly steer them around this, that this might be important, but not to say that there's anything wrong with them. And it's this natural intelligence and knowing your natural strengths and your brain dominances and your personality profile.
Yes.
Back to the self-awareness. Teach them that. Primary schools, you know, they don't do that. They do that in high school, but they're already lost. They're already, as you said, they're being bullied. They're already got self-esteem issues. There's something wrong with me. When I was teaching kids in VCAL at year 11, their self-esteem was so low. I'm a spud. I'm just a dummy. I'm just this. And they would play up in class. And I go, oh my God, these guys have already been turned off learning. I need to forget the curriculum for the first month and re-empower them that you are amazing. You've just forgotten that you're not amazing because you've been told you're not amazing. But let's just redo that. Oh no, Derek, you've got all this to get through. I mean, oh my goodness, it's just, let's develop the person and work on that. But it does require a lot of teachers with patience. It does require them to have more learning. And, you know, we can bring this back to the workplace. We can bring this back to parents, leaders, particularly. The life skills is bringing the best out of the person and developing the person so that they can be the best version of themselves. And I think that's why we're sort of coaches, because we've learnt the skills, we've learnt these tools, and then we have a passion for sharing it and empowering other people. So that makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah, I agree. You know, just listened to Dr. Gabor Mate talk recently about the leaders, big leaders in the world, who could identify the most challenging leaders of those who have experienced trauma. Well, that was really interesting. You can see by that where the trauma, and so these men mostly who've experienced trauma in their lives, playing out that trauma in various ways, particularly over the last 2 years, this dogma and this, you know, my way or the highway, do it. And it said, you know, and he talks all the time, bottom line is trauma trapped in the body. And the outcome of that are these traumatic leaders leading us to war, because that's what their trauma is being played out. And, you know, he did I don't know if you know of Dr. Gabor Mate. He's written the book. Yeah. And so he, in Vancouver at the moment, there's a place called the Downtown East Side, where it's just a tent city. And then the government came along with trying to get rid of it. And he had actually, I think he's what we call a Métis, M-E-T-I-S, which is a half Indigenous, half white person, if that's the way to say, person. So, and he worked with the Indigenous people in Canada for many years. And he was saying 39% of those down in the Downtown East Side, drug issues, are those that have come from the residential schools and the abuse that the churches put these young Indigenous people through. Until we deal with that trauma, we're never going to solve homelessness, and we're never going to solve the addiction issue. All these are a result of childhood trauma. And I think that, you know, that, again, a life school for all of us as parents and as teachers and as coaches and as people in leadership, to understand how trauma plays out for people. And that, you know, it's a big T trauma or a little T trauma. It doesn't have to be something huge. It could be something a little, you know, my dad hit me when I felt vulnerable because he wouldn't let me have a red lolly. And that just, you know, went into the amygdala at that point. But so much of what people do is trauma-based. And even today, I think a lot of children would be experiencing absent parents, and mum could be sitting right next to her, but she's on her phone all day long.
It's the
brain development with kids, particularly with COVID and stuff. Yeah, the delayed development. Yep.
And I see a lot of trauma, you know, about money.
Oh yes,
experiences, different stories you've heard, all the things that happen to ancestors. You know, it all comes in, and then it plays out every day.
Yeah, it's the unprocessed trauma, because I mean, we all have tools that help people process trauma, right? And once it's processed and it no longer plays a role, life changes dramatically.
That's exactly right.
So we're almost at the end, and I know we could talk about this for many more hours. Just as a wrap up, so if there's one skill that you could give, that you would suggest to people, and especially young people, that they not should, but that they would benefit from learning, what would that be? And if I may, then I'm not the last person to talk. I I'm going to go first. Have the difficult conversations. Learn how to challenge somebody constructively, because we are way too into listening to people with the white coats, with the 5 million followers, you know, the people who have the most money, you know, all of those people where it means absolutely nothing. But if you can constructively challenge somebody, and I've just had an experience in an organization where the person rather left than challenged constructively. That makes all the difference in the world to how you process your emotions, how you deal with your needs, your boundaries, all of those things. So that's me. Who's next?
Well, I'll go next, and I think for me it would be for a little along the same lines as you're talking about, is to not trust the big food and big pharma. Recognize when you're being sold to, when you're, you know, where do these studies come from, what's going on, and at the same time learn to trust in your body, because your body will always tell you if a food is not great for you, and what's right for me isn't right for somebody else sitting next to me. But for you, whatever you feel, whatever goes on for you, trust that.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, absolutely agree with both of that, and you know, just, you know, financial literacy, particularly compound growth, and just, you know, helping children not be afraid of money. You know, it's something to be a friend with, to sort of, you know, have an alliance with, to sort of work through with your entire life. If people can understand that it's like a partnership, then they can sort of, you know, have a very long relationship with it, and, you know, and make it very fruitful, rather than it just being something that's really scary and is over there and it's not for me.
Yeah, very important. And for me, I talked about it before, I think a very valuable skill is to learn mindfulness, practice being present, you know, slow our game down, be here, and then we can make better choices, we can make better decisions, better behaviors, better actions. And you know, so it's just, is it easy when we're outside focused? No. So it's just about stopping and being practicing it, like developing a muscle. We got to practice it and practice it.
Okay, so we've had listening to your body, reading labels, critical thinking. We've had compound interest, and we've had staying present in the moment and having difficult conversations constructively. So those are those are things you can do right now, and they're very easy to do. Mindfulness is, again, staying present. Again, all of these things you can Google and find out more about, or you can talk to people and get some. And again, it's passing this on, and this is why we're here. It's not about passing it on to the next generation. You know, this unresolved trauma, you know, just doing all of these things blindly because we're following the crowd, but really being who you are, and acknowledging your individualism. So is that a good wrap up for?
Yes.
That was what I wanted to say. I didn't want to be the last person to speak, because I wanted to hear you say first things first instead of going. Yeah. So.
And feeling empowered, you know, not being swept around by others and, you know, authorities. You know, it's just like you said, finding your intuitive truth and kind of going for that.
That's right. And the big catch craze is the truth is out there somewhere, and also let's flip it. The truth is actually in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll know it. You know, it's and create that space where you listen to yourself. Is it sitting with me right? And if it's not, that's our intuition trying to guide us that this is not right. I've learned that most people are following somebody else's dreams. You know, and what's yours? I did a little blog on, you know, whose path are you going down, and where's it winding, and where do you think it's going to end up, and is that the best for you? And if you're not careful of which path and which road you're on, you might not like the direction or where you're going to end up in. So it's just.
Well, that's a good place to end.
Yes.
Your own path, the ultimate life skill. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Thank you all for sharing your wisdom and your insight. Much appreciated. And everybody, thank you again. And we'll see you at the next panel.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Bye.